Hey everyone, it's Sleepy Reader. It's my Sleepy Vlog number 83. Sleepy Vlogs where I really let myself meander and go off in all directions, potentially, whatever I feel like. Um, Lately, I have had collecting on my mind, time and human nature on my mind, if you will, and Coppa. So I do intend to maybe address some thoughts on Coppa. Well, you've probably heard too many people talk about it already, but I'd like to just touch on that at some point. But before I go off on that direction, I wanted to talk about Gene Wolfe. So he died last April, or this past April of this year. I think I didn't find out till May. And I think I was still at that point, even though it had been maybe 8 months or so since my father's death, I was still kind of struggling with his death. And I felt like this was one of the last of my favorite science fiction writers to die. And so I went around searching for people talking about his death, and I looked through podcasts, and I found that there were a number of podcasts about Gene Wolfe. And one of them was going chapter by chapter explication of his most famous 4-book series, The Book of the New Sun. And I felt inspired. I wanted to read some Gene Wolfe after his death. I'd read the Book of the New Sun back in the late 80s. And so I got the audiobooks of the Book of the New Sun, which starts with the what's it called? The Shadow of the Torturer, and the final book is called The Citadel of the Autarch. And I listened to 2 chapters, and then I would listen to the podcast where they discussed those 2 chapters. And it's such a complicated book that you can read it many, many times before you start to fully understand it. And people have written all kinds of books to help you understand it because it has so many references to things. For one, it although it takes place in the far, far future of the Earth, like millions of years from now, and the sun is dying, and there's just layers and layers of history. But Gene Wolfe uses obscure words from ancient times and stuff instead of alien words or making stuff up. So someone came up with a whole, basically, dictionary of all the words in his book, in his books, called the Lexicon Earthus. He spells Earth, Urth. Anyway, so that's a big book. Kind of half definitions, half encyclopedia kind of entries explaining things in the book. And there's many other books about the Book of the New Sun. This one's called Solar Labyrinth. So I found it a very intense experience to sort of delve deep into those books and really think about them. And they take place way in the far future. They supposedly contain a lot of Catholic philosophy. I'm not sure. They certainly play off of the Bible and religion and possibly Catholic philosophy. So yeah, there's kind of the cartoon of Gene Wolfe. Anyway, the point of all that is it really, along with the death of my father and the fact that I have kind of retired from my job. I mean, I did retire from my job, but I'm looking around for another job or to create another job for myself. But a lot of time on my hands and looking back at things. A lot of thinking about what makes us and wondering, there's that whole feeling, do other people even think like you? Everybody's trapped in their own head and they only think like themselves. And a lot of the exterior evidence is often that other people don't think like you. And sometimes they do. And as you get older, as I am getting older, the older you get, I think, the more you notice how language is changing and the meanings of words keep shifting. And the emotional tenor of language I've really noticed changing, maybe in the Trump era. But I've been thinking about, how in a lot of the comics I read now, the F word and the S word and various visceral kinds of words are now very common. And I feel like we're in an angry time, and a free to express your anger. I mean, during the Vietnam War was an angry time, and I'm sure I know people used those words, but the more common words were like groovy and cool and psychedelic and peace. So the mindset seems different. But I was thinking beyond that, how, with this lexicon Earthis and stuff, how language shapes the way we think, and do people who are raised in different languages have different thought processes and a different worldview just based on their language? And then thinking, if human beings still exist a million years from now, or even 10,000 years from now, or 1,000 years from now, will they be at all? How much like me and you will they be? How much does humanity stay a constant, or does it shift with the language, with the thinking, with the circumstances, with the diet, all of that? I don't know why I'm thinking about all that, but I am. And why is that connected to me? I don't know. Anyway, and now there was a sequel to that 4-book series called The Earth of the New Sun. I find it all very confusing because there is the Book of the New Sun and then the Earth of the New Sun. And the Book of the New Sun takes place on Earth. The Earth of the New Sun, at least as far as I've gotten into it, takes place off of Earth, far off in the galaxy. That's a whole thing. Oh, here's another Gene Wolfe book. Book of Days, which includes several books together. One is called The Castle of the Otter, which is a book in which Gene Wolfe tried to explain parts of his book. I think maybe just after the second volume had come out. But he actually dances around and just creates more mysteries and doesn't explain things. And I feel somehow that all connects to me thinking about my dad's death and everything. And maybe I worked through my dad's death thinking about all these things. My dad also was a religious Catholic, as was Gene Day. And I keep saying Gene Day, that's a comic book artist, Gene Wolfe. And like Gene Wolfe, he was the old-fashioned intellectual Catholic, who was really into Latin and classical history and all of that, and how it somehow how all of that, at least for their generation, somehow all that ties together. I don't know what, studying ancient Rome and Greece really has that much to do with the teachings of Christ, but it seemed to make sense to that generation. And so those books of the New Sun are full of that kind of referential stuff to the stuff that interested that generation of intellectual Catholics. Put intellectual in quotes. I don't like that word, but so yeah, everything is always changing. So back to very mundane. I think back around the same time, around May, I realized I started to admit to myself that maybe I'm not the kind of collector that I always thought I was, because I thought my collecting was based around reading. And there was always so I collect things that I want to read. And there's always an aspect of, I've always been interested, like when I was interested in science fiction, I was interested in the history of science fiction, not just reading my favorite books. When I was interested in music, I was interested in the history of music, not just reading my favorite books, or the history of rock and roll when I was into rock and roll, or the history of punk rock when I was into punk rock, or history of metal. History of blues particularly interested me, actually still greatly interests me. But beyond that, I didn't think I was just collecting to collect. But in May, so we're going way back now, I was in Arizona and I went in Tucson, and they have a really cool bookstore, might say, called Bookman's. And I found all these Perry Rhodans. There's about, like 110 Perry Rhodans translated from German into English, and I think published bi-monthly or twice a month maybe. Would that be semi-monthly? Anyway, way back when I was a kid, and you've probably seen in some other videos of mine, if you've really watched me for a long time, that I've slowly been picking up more Perry Rhodans as kind of a nostalgia thing, because I was so fascinated by the idea of it when I was 14, but also because I thought I would read some. And I have started reading a number of volumes, and they often feel almost unreadable, whether it's the bad translation or just bad writing that is translated correctly. I don't know. But as I now feel like I want to get all the Perry Rhodans, I realize this may well be something I never really read more than 1 or 2 volumes of. I mean, I had a subscription as a kid when I was 14. I think I got 6 volumes come in the mail as they were published. And I read all of those. And one of the things I loved about it was, let's see if I find an unwrapped one. Those of you who have read these may know that because hundreds of volumes had been published in Germany, at the end of each chapter they would say, in 10 adventures from now, Kurt Brand tries to control unleashed powers. And then, so at the end of each chapter, it would fling you into the future, or give you hints of the future of the Perry Rhodan series. I wonder if Perry Rhodan is how Germans pronounce it. Rhodan, is that a French name? What kind of name? So at the back of the next chapter, 25 adventures from now, you'll gaze upon the wonder flower of Utik. One of the things is that makes me want to collect Perry Rhodan is I really like the Gray Morrow covers. They kind of capture a certain science fiction feel, an old-fashioned retro science fiction feel that I really love. So at the end of the next chapter, it'll probably say in 100 issues, and then in 200 issues. No, that chapter doesn't say it at the end. Some of them, I guess, depending on how the page layout falls. 75 issues from now, Clark Darlton will take you to the Second Empire, and so on. Anyway, and I guess, this whole fascination with science fiction has a lot to do with a place in the universe kind of thing, who we are, what our identity is, the sense of changeability, the unknowableness of certain aspects of life seem to, for some of us who love science fiction, seem to be best reflected in a science fiction kind of setting and story. The Epidemic Center Arlon. Yeah, when I was a kid, I thought this guy, Clark Darlton, was a great writer. I think he's actually a pen name from one of the other writers. I believe in Germany these were written weekly since the 60s and maybe are still going. I'm not sure. Love that cover. Secret Mission Moloch. I know the covers in Germany are entirely different, and I've seen pictures of those online, and those look really cool too. Good thing those aren't easy for me to collect. So I was realizing I've come to accept that I am a little bit more the classic collector. I'm still always a run collector, which was originally based in reading, but is maybe also based in completism. And sort of now that collecting is kind of a whole lot easier than it was, say, when I was a kid, or even 20 years ago, certainly 30 or 40 years ago, the pseudo one. That urge to complete a collection, to get, hey, if you like this, you'll like all of them, so you might as well get all of them. This one was part of my subscription. I remember getting that one. It might have even though it was from an American book company, it might have been a subscription I got during the year I lived in Geneva, Switzerland, when I was 14. So then I even more treasured anything sort of comic booky or fantastical or science fictional that I could find in English. Oh, here's a few more Perry Rhodan. So yeah, I'm definitely in my book buying now, even though they're books, not even comic books. There's a element of just being a pure collector. there is that sense of pop culture archaeology that I really enjoy, and that sense of history to a degree, although Perry Rhodan is not such a key figure in the history of at least science fiction from an American point of view that you need to have every English language Perry Rhodan book in your collection. But that's what I'm aiming for now. And just for the heck of it, so there's other science fiction paperbacks that I seem to be buying for the covers. I might read them someday. Certainly Clifford D. Simek is a very good writer in my memory of his work, but I definitely bought this issue because I liked that cover. So in some of my free time, sort of on and off, I poke around the growing number of small bookstores that have popped up, or small used bookstores that have popped up around Portland. There's at least 3 within kind of walking distance of my house, so it makes a fun little walk. Pop in, look around at the covers. So this is a little different. I might read it, The Island of Fu Manchu. And those of you who are Bronze Age comic book collectors know Fu Manchu from the Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu Shang-Chi comics. Marvel got the rights to Fu Manchu back then from, I guess, the Sax-Rohmer estate. And they wanted to put him in a comic book, so they ended up making a Kung Fu character his son. And then, since he is a villain, they ended up making son versus father. The son becomes good and challenges the father, and ended up with a wonderful over 100-issue run on that idea. But I had never read any of the original Fu Manchu books, so when I saw this at the bookstore, it both appealed to just my collecting of retro covers, and then, hey, I might want to actually read this. But if I read it, these cheap paperbacks, it might just fall apart. But I'll probably dare it. I think I've already cracked it open a little bit. And here's another one that I bought just for the cover, and a nod back to my 14-year-old self that loved any books with medieval sword fight types of things in it. The Long Swords, the turbulent 11th century, the story of 2 Viking invaders who plundered their way across England and battled each other for the possession of a beautiful woman. And back then, I think, along with the other excitements of such a book, as a young teenager, you would read it in hopes that there might be a sex scene tucked away somewhere in there. Before the internet provided teenagers with endless sex scenes. Hal Clement, Natives of Space. Hal Clement is a very respected and important person in the history of hard science fiction, the science fiction that goes for the real nuts and bolts of science. But I bought this for the cover, but I might actually want to read it someday. And then Spartan Planet by A. Bertram Chandler. A. Bertram had a lot of books out in the era of these kind of pulpy paperbacks. I will read some of them. I don't know if I'll read them all. Love the title, Spartan Planet. And then, let's see. I got this Andre Norton book. Again, someone I might read. She's supposed to be, Andre Norton is a she. That was her pen name. I can't remember what her real name was. She's supposed to be a real influential author. I've only read a few things of hers when I was a kid. It never caught on with me at the time, but I've always meant to swing back around and try it. But mostly I liked this groovy cover here. SF with a touch of Tolkien. Before fantasy was real popular and science fiction was much more popular, there were a lot of science fiction novels that were fantasy in disguise. So they read like a fantasy book, but they would be called science fiction, and they would have a few touches like this is a planet where magic happens or something like that. Then I couldn't resist, I can't remember where I bought these, some copies of Astounding Science Fiction, this one from 1948, with a classic, with a chapter anyway, from the classic, or a serialization of a classic A.E. Van Vogt novel, The Players of Null A. I don't think Van Vogt is very popular anymore, but he's very important to the history of science fiction. And another astounding, with an H-beam Piper thing listed on the cover. But anyway, who knows whether I'll crack these open and read them. Is that supposed to be like an invisible Santa Claus there? I don't know. Okay, so yeah, the collecting is part of an attempt to reach back in time, I think, and to take a hold of abstract feelings and thoughts and have them embodied in physical objects. At least that's one of many ways to interpret collecting. So another kind of, I was well since May, probably starting in the summer. I want to say the summer. I'm not sure when I started thinking I could spend, watching YouTube and seeing people with fancy issues, Hulk 181 or some key early, the Galactus trilogy or other interesting Silver Age key books and all of that. I thought, well, you know what? If I wanted to, I could buy those or some of them. But I can't remember how it happened. But then I realized if I'm really going to spend money on, bigger money on collecting comic book stuff, what do I really want? And what I really want is, come to realize, is original comic book art. And so I've been playing around a lot in the last few months, more than the last few months, I guess. I don't know how many. I don't remember when I started it, probably over the summer. Mostly bidding on the Heritage auction. I got the auction app on my phone and on my iPad, and I'll go through and I'll search on a name like, say, Jack Kirby or Mike Plug or Gene Colan, see what's for sale. You can see things that haven't gone for sale yet but are going to, and track them. And kind of like bidding on eBay, it gets kind of addictive. And it's still very exciting to me. So I started winning some stuff, quote winning. And the Heritage is a very frustrating process. I would say mostly because of all the fees. So you have what you've bid, and then Heritage adds on a 20%, what do they call it? I can't even remember what they call it. A 20% some kind of, let me look and see if I can find my Heritage app on the phone. Anyway, it's called a BP. I can't remember what BP stands for. And they add, so say you've bid $100 on a piece of artwork. If you win, you're going to pay $120 plus $30 postage plus 2% charge for using a credit card. You could give them your bank account number, but there's no way I want to do that. So it really adds up. So if you're buying, like I bought some, I'm going to show them in another video, but I bought a few higher end, still not very high end. I bought some obscure pieces by some well-known artists that may go up in value. Maybe can sell them when I'm even older, or when I die and my daughter wants to sell them or my wife wants to sell them. But anyway, so say you bought a piece of artwork for $1,000, you would have to pay them $1,200. So when you went to sell it, you wouldn't make a profit till the value of it had gone up over $1,200, and really even more, because, like I said, you'd paid that 2% for the credit card and $30 for the shipping. So if you view it as an investment, you'd have to be very careful. And this BP thing, this additional amount they charge, it can be a lot. Say you bought I haven't done this, but say you bought a $20,000 piece of art, you have to add $4,000 on top of that for the fee to the buyer's premium. That's what they call it, the buyer's premium. Oh, lucky buyer, you get a premium. So I suppose the same calculation would be if you're on eBay. it's the seller paying the premium, not the buyer. So I've done some kind of wacky things on Heritage. For instance, I bid on this lot of, I can't even remember how many, like 10 or 12 pages of Archie comics by Dan Parent and other artists. And I hope Dan Parent never watches this, because I got all of this art for $50. So obviously no one really wants the Archie original pages, but I did. I probably would have happily paid the same amount for 2 pages or something, just because I wanted some in my collection. So now I just have a large amount of original Archie art. Oh, and there's the most frustrating thing about Heritage, which is that after you're done bidding through the app, there's then a further bidding period. And I think there may be some way to bid online or through the telephone, but it's also people who are physically at the gallery get to then bid on it. So there was, recently I bid a pretty large amount, but not large amount for Jack Kirby, but I bid on a Jack Kirby commandy page. And when the bidding ended, the bidding that I had access to ended, I was, my final bid was much higher than the final price. So I was sure I was going to win it. And then I looked later, they don't even tell you you've lost it. I looked later and realized, no, I hadn't won it. They also don't tell you if you've won it. You just, a few days later, get a bill. They do tell you while the active bidding is going on, hey, someone's outbid you, go bid again. So it's a frustrating process. So anyway, come to see afterwards, oh, whoever it was who knows how to work the system of the second level of bidding, got to just bid one step above my top bid on that commandy, and then they got the commandy. And I had that happen with like 3 or 4 things, a Will Eisner one and some other things that I wanted. So I guess it behooves me to look into how you become a bidder in that second level of bidding. Why even bid at all, I suppose, in the regular bidding, although I have won stuff there. Here's something very recent that I got that I'm very happy about. This is a single day's comic strip from the Conan newspaper comic strip drawn by Alfredo Alcala. And I really love getting that look at his art, holding it in my hands, thinking about the artist who really worked on it, the human being. So credited as written by Roy Thomas. I have no reason to believe it wasn't. I mean, I know with Stan Lee comic strips that isn't always the case. Anyway, I'm really happy with that. And I also, another thing I've been bidding on and winning is, Kurt Swan art. This is, I believe, Kurt Swan inked by Murphy Anderson. And you can get these quite inexpensively, relatively speaking. And so I'm really pleased about that. An artist, there's a huge amount of Kurt Swan art out there, I suppose. That might be part of it. And part of it is that, people just an artist people take for granted, although a lot of people also realize that Kurt Swan was a kind of special artist for his time. Let's see. It's kind of weird how the bagging here works. Let me put this. Oh, look. Is there anything on the back? No. Sometimes you'll find some drawings on the back. Okay. Another weird thing I got cheaply is a little Lotta original art. I can't remember the date on this. Oh, it says someone has a note. It's 2 pages 1 and 2 for $200. That must have been in a shop. That's not at all what I paid. Much lower than that, although I don't remember the amount. But I'm kind of a fan of that Harvey Comics, kids comics art style, especially Little Dot, which I haven't got yet. But and then and Little Lotta is my second favorite. And this one seems to have. I wonder if it will have little. I don't think I've looked at page 2 yet. That might have Little Dot on it. Evil tape. Let's see if I can slide page 2 out. No Little Dot on this page. Maybe I'm just misremembering. Maybe I bid on something with Little Lotta and Little Dot and did not win that. So it's kind of a dangerous area, and I've done a mix of mostly, inexpensive pieces that one can nab like this, and then a few very expensive ones. But maybe it would, very expensive for me, still at the bottom level. I mean, I'm seeing covers that go for $200,000, classic Kirby pages going for $14,000, $15,000, $20,000. But I am not, when I'm looking at the commandees and stuff, they're going, the pages that I've bid on, going for less. Often, if there's not big panels or big action or key characters, this one just slid right out of the bag. So I've been bidding on a lot of Gene Day. And Gene Day is an artist who always sort of fascinated me, especially on Master of Kung Fu again, hooking back to that Sax Rohmer book. So I think, that's another thing that I've lost a number of Gene Days just by $10 or $50 or whatever the increment was, because of however people bid after the bidding closes. I think I love his use. I've become more and more of a fan of sort of the heavy blacks, and he was really a master of that, and of the that sense of continuity from panel to panel, which I made a video about recently, not about Gene Day, but about how much I love the panel to panel continuity aspect of comics, and he's a great exemplar of that. So anyway, expect to see more original art videos from me, and we'll see how long I stick with it. It's both frustrating and fascinating bidding on Heritage. I did get I got a couple of things from a art site called Romita Man, which has fixed prices, and I've looked elsewhere. I bought some Hulk art from the dealer who works with Joe Bennett, the main artist on Immortal Hulk. So I'll try to show all of those things in the future. A quick note about Coppa. I saw some good videos about that. I may be able to dig them up and put some things down below. You're hearing a lot of information. It strikes me that it is YouTube / Google really, just copying out, copying out. I guess, what's most upsetting is that if you're, from my point of view, if you're marked a children's video, then they take away comments. And I guess they take away most ways people can save your video or accidentally stumble across your video. And as a father of a daughter who watches, most of her screen entertainment is on YouTube now, and a little bit we watch as a family. We'll watch some sitcom or something. But most of her own entertainment is on YouTube, and she likes writing comments, and she wouldn't have found all these channels about things that interest her. She would have just wasted her time on stuff that doesn't interest her. So I don't understand why YouTube can't write some algorithms that figure out if this is a children's video, you can make comments, but we won't track your comments and link them to all the cookies we're collecting. There must be a way there, but instead, there must be a reason why they're not trying. Instead, they're just throwing it on the shoulders of the comics creators, or not the video creators. And of course, the great fear for those of us in the comics community or video game community or toy community, is they'll be accused of being aimed at children, whether or not they are, and then either they'll be fined or they'll just be forced into this limbo where there's no comments. For most of us comic book YouTube channels, we're here to communicate with each other. So, and we've made friends and all of that, acquaintances, just good sort of internet buddies who share thoughts and ideas. A lot of that goes away with being marked as a children's. And here I am wearing the Flintstones. I guess that might get me marked as a children's channel. This is totally my adult fascination with the Flintstones. My nostalgia. So anybody involved in nostalgia for things from childhood, I guess, is potentially in this boat. I've heard people, I've seen videos where they say, well, the FTC is reasonable and is not going to just go after little guys and people like that. But then you just sort of have that experience from the way YouTube works with just vast algorithms that will search for things and sweep people up in large groups, whether they fit those groups or not. So you don't know. What I'm going to do for now, I'm basically marking most of my videos as for adults. I have gone back and looked for any video I could find with my daughter in it, and I've marked those for children, so I guess the comments will disappear on those. My daughter doesn't really want to appear on videos where there'll be no comments talking about what she said. So maybe less videos with my daughter, or maybe we'll do videos and they'll be marked as kids' videos, and people will have to send us comments some other way, or we just won't get comments on those. But I'm on the larger end. I'm sad that a lot of these channels that my daughter enjoys and gets a lot out of are going to probably go away or be nearly impossible for her to find. A lot of them will go away because they are young people in their 20s making money, making their career, at least short term or part of their money, off of spending huge amounts of time creating videos that entertain 11-year-olds. And I'm thinking of videos she watches about Legos, where people do very elaborate Lego videos, videos about Minecraft, videos about The Sims, and videos where people take dolls and totally rebuild them and make them into other characters. All these kinds of things which are fascinating and take the creators of those a lot of time. And then I also wonder is if all of this goes through and a huge number of those children's channels go away and or don't make much money, and will that mean YouTube's not making that much money? And will Google is Google sort of giving up on YouTube to a certain degree, saying it's too much of a hassle? We'll maybe they'll leave it there, but they won't manage it much. They won't, other than the strict stuff about passing the law, but they won't do as much upkeep in terms of the software and such. To a degree, actually, if they didn't change things so often, I'd be happy on that level. They've had a lot of changes recently that are a bummer, but maybe some of those changes, like that they got rid of supporting live streaming video, and that you have to get a third party to do a hangout now. Maybe they did that as a cost-cutting measure. Maybe it's was an advanced sign that they're investing less into YouTube. Again, a shame, because YouTube is a cultural phenomenon. It's different things to different people, but it's changed a lot of lives. It's definitely added to my social life and my sense of who I am, again, because the comic book self was in the closet. It was just totally in the back. It was a totally introverted in the back of my mind thing. Now it's like, it's still one of my introverted places, but it's also something I share, and it's a social thing, and it's great to take those inner parts of yourself and spread them out to the world in a sense. Maybe if it really crushes comic book YouTube, I don't really anticipate it will. But if it does, maybe I'll just go to doing a booktube channel. But that it would be a all about science fiction booktube channel, I suppose, and it wouldn't come out as frequently. It takes me a lot longer to get around to reading novels and talking about them and that kind of thing than it would comic books, which have this nice weekly rhythm. Okay, well, on that note, I will say goodbye for now. I'll be back soon with more videos. Coppa willing. So I did that stuff with my for Coppa, with marking things with my daughter, and I changed again based on a video I saw where a person suggested the FTC is going to be looking at how the channel in general presents itself. So I changed the language in my about part of my channel to something along the lines of talking to other adult comic book collectors. And because before it said, I read comics, I talk about comics. So I now it probably says something like, I read comics, I talk to other adult comic book collectors about comics. And I'm going to try to remember, this was a suggestion from Brian at InfoRead Media. I'm going to try to, in the description of each new video, I'm not going to go back and do it all the old videos. I'm going to say this is intended for an adult audience chatting about comics. And I'm going to put the word PG, the letters PG in there for whatever that's worth. So anyway, yeah, that's that. I'll talk to you all later. Bye-bye.